we're going to go ahead and start streaming. And we are live now. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. So welcome everyone. This is our weekly live stream for Wisdom Sparks. As you guys know, we usually chime in a minute or so early because Wisdom Sparks is all about sparking ideas and inspiration in people of faith and organizations of faith. And we know what the Bible says, right? People won't know unless you share the word. How can they hear unless someone shares? So this is a time where we ask you guys, push that share button on your live stream. If you're chiming in on Facebook, you can share it to your page, share it to your groups, because you never know. It might be from your share that somebody gets the information that they need to have a new idea or to solve a problem. So I'm really excited about my guests today. We have the Clarks, Mayra and Clark, and they're going to be sharing some really powerful information about supporting relationships and about mental health. And so please just take that moment to go ahead and share, and also make sure that you follow us. Like if you found out about this through another link, take the time to update your notifications so that you can see our weekly live streams and you can get all of the information about how to connect with this powerful couple after this. So it's 12 o'clock. So let's get started because I know time is of the essence. Some of you are chiming in on your lunchtime. My name is Dr. Sean Jegede. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called 316 DC. And for those of you who don't know, 316, we basically exist to help people of faith use their total lives to be able to make a difference for God. And so we partner, we support partnerships in communities that have faith-based organizations and individuals at the heart of them to solve problems in our community, because we know that we have solutions. And each week we have Wisdom Sparks, which is a live stream that helps connect people with other people, because we believe that the ideas we have, the wisdom that God shares, that when we share with other people, something will be sparked inside of them. And so this week we're here, as I share, with Mayra, Clark, and Clark. He goes by Clark. I'll let him explain that. Yeah. So why don't we start? I have to talk lower. My daughter tells me I talk very loud, so I'm trying to be conscious of that. But why don't we start by just telling people, I know you guys, but tell our audience a little bit about yourselves as a couple. You have an amazing story, and how you got started as marriage educators.
Well, my name is Mayra.
I'm Derek Clark, but I go by Clark.
That's a whole nother story. We'll probably explain it another time. But we've been married for almost 13 years, right? Mm-hmm. So we're at the dirty dozen.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks. And we have two beautiful children, a boy and a girl, Davidson and Eliana, and we have a gorgeous German Shepherd mix, who's our firstborn. Rocket Bella. We live right in the DMV area, and we've both been serving in ministry over 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's how we met, So you single women, keep working that field, because you will find. Yes.
There you go. So it's not about like going out of your way to try to find something, but it's about living your life on purpose. I love that. And in your purpose, you'll find your mate whose purpose will be connected to yours, right?
And it was, and it was we got married in our mid 30s. So it was kind of later in, than usual, than people would imagine. Not now. I think it's more normalized now. Mm-hmm. The less 10, 15 years ago, it was late. And so it doesn't matter how old you are and where you are in life, and you will find love. And we found each other on purpose, for God's purpose.
Awesome. And what do you guys do? So you're marriage educators. What does that mean? Like, what do you do?
So in marriage education, one of the things that we do is we practice and we give people tools to thrive and for their relationships to thrive. And so we go over curriculum with people, and we go through communication, conflict resolution, partner style and habits, the whole nine that just encompasses marriage and making sure that the marriage goes forward. Because it's a life journey, you know, and so you have to think of it that way. It's tools on a journey. You know, you got your backpack, you have to have the right tools and use the tools at the right time. And so that's the thing that we do, is like we help them use the tools at the right time.
You know, I love that, because a lot of times when we think about marriage, we just think it happens, right? Everybody thinks about, you know, and for some people it does just work out that way. But usually we spend all of our time thinking about the wedding, especially for women. You know, what are we going to put into the wedding? What are the colors going to be? The flowers? I mean, down to the meticulous detail. But when it comes to preparing for that actual relationship, the heart and the meat of it, we don't spend a lot of time doing that. So I love that you guys are helping people see it's not magic, right? I mean, it sounds like this is hard work.
Right.
I know from experience, this is hard work.
And, you know, just to piggyback off of what you were saying, it's about intentionality. Just as you said, when you're putting all that effort into that wedding day, that's a lot of intentionality that goes into that. It's a lot of planning that goes into that. But the day after, and the weeks after, and the months after, and the years after, it doesn't seem that people spend that much time, you know, on that, you know, packing for that part of the journey. And for marriages to thrive, you have to put in that much effort to make sure that you have the tools for that part of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, because when all of those guests go home, all of the, you know, confetti is gone. You're sitting across the table looking at this person. And if you haven't taken that time beforehand getting to that point, it's like, now what? So, and I know we had some conversations prior to this, and I know from those conversations that you guys, it's not like the curriculum is really good. You're trained in evidence-based curriculum and you share that with people, but it's more than that. It's like you partner, you're walking alongside these couples, because it's scary, right? You've now legally and spiritually committed yourself to this person. So you guys are walking alongside them, supporting them. And so that's a little bit different, right? For sometimes when people prepare for marriage, they just have a couple of marriage sessions. Hopefully, you know, some people don't even have that. They go to a couple of marriage sessions, they talk about finances or budgeting, and that's it. So what do you think like the advantage is that in the way that you guys do it and go about it? And why is that so important?
Yeah, you know, what's so interesting is that when you say people go through a few courses, what have you, you know, we call it the 1%ers, those people who come to us or even get premarital counseling or education are unfortunately 1%. And we know the statistics show that now we have almost over half of marriages end in divorce. With this new pandemic that the whole world is going through, the divorce rate has gone up, and it continues to go up. And so it's one thing to say, here's how you communicate, right? It's one thing to show, here's a communication styles. It's another thing to say, my style is and his style is and this is how we get over it, right? Like, and many times for humans, especially our Black and Brown community, we need to see life in action. So see life in action, seeing us interact. They see that we're different. They speak to us. They can hear that we're different. You all could see that we're different, right? And so how do we make it work? That's more important than turn to Exodus chapter 5 or read, you know, Genesis. That is more important. Not that the word is not important, but when you see the word in action, where you get to hold it and you get to relive it and say, if this worked for them, these two opposite individuals, well, why can't it work for us?
Yeah. And that's so good because we know representation matters, right? And a lot of times, like I've heard you say before, Mayra, that like we relive what we see. And sometimes if you've had trauma or you've grown up with nothing but dysfunctional relationships around you, that's all that you know how to duplicate. So I love that you guys are opening up your marriage to people and your parents, right? You have two beautiful children. So people are getting to see real life, but that's scary. Right? Sometimes you see, we joked earlier, I even have this background up behind me because it's hard to invite people into your space, especially as Christians and as believers, because we kind of feel like you have to live up to this huge standard. And that's not always possible. So I can imagine for you guys, that takes a certain level of vulnerability. It's being willing to be honest and to invite people into your space to be able to see both the good and the bad. So, I mean, how do you get to that place? You guys have had years of experience. How do you get to that place where you're comfortable with letting the world in? Because not everybody does that.
Well, I have to say, at first it was kind of scary, but I think that as time went on and as we began to share more, it just became it became almost second nature to us. We were invited to do so like years ago to just share, and that's where it started. Pastor, I can say his name, Pastor Paul, he invited us to share about, because we were newlyweds at that point. We were about married, I guess, 3 years. And he invited us to share a little bit about, I think it started with in-laws. It started with in-laws. But we had very unique experiences and challenges with our in-laws. And so one of the things that we had that helped us out was that our story helped other people. Right. It helped other people not to feel so alone. And like, as we shared, you just see the heads in the audience go, wow, oh, wow, that it happened just like that for us. And people would talk to us, after our classes about, hey, how'd you handle that? Oh, wow, I'd love to have some advice on this. And so that's how it all started. It was like we saw that our story, that our narrative helped other people about that community, because lots of times a lot of married people, they feel isolated. Yes. When they have their challenges, when they have stuff that's kind of hard, sometimes they feel alone. Yeah. If you don't have that right community, if you don't have that right set of friends, you could feel alone. And especially in the first couple years, because your friends, sometimes they actually back away because they're like, you know what? We need to give them some space because we want them. And like during those beginning years, you need your community. You do. You need to open your arms and you need your friends to come in and go, hey, I was thinking about you. So you need them more. Yeah. In that time. So yeah, just to circle back, that's how it all started. It started with us volunteering, sharing our story, and seeing how our story helped other people.
That's good. Awesome. It's like vulnerability is contagious, right? Yeah. Everybody walks around with their guard up, but as soon as somebody is willing to just let their guard down, my sister has this thing where she's like, put your shoulders down. She works with children with special needs and she can tell when they're stressed and tense. And it's like, you put your shoulders down and rest into being vulnerable with the people around you, that other people are going to follow your lead and be vulnerable as well, including that husband and wife in there. So I love that. The work that you're doing is so important. Yes, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that your mess is not unique. And I think that sometimes we want the kitchen to be clean and the kids to be perfect and all that stuff. But the truth of the matter is that our kids drive us crazy. Our kitchen ends up dirty. We have laundry piled up, right? And that is the norm, that the Pinterest, image is actually not the norm. That is the exception. Wow. And to start normalizing normal life, right? Like
Yeah.
we have to normalize having fights. We have to
Yes.
normalize dirty dishes. We have to normalize hard conversations around race and parenting and sex and singleness and parents. If we can't normalize those, then it becomes this facade, right?
Yeah.
And people walk in, and that's why we have this divorce rate, because people go in with rose-colored glasses, like
Yes.
not really understanding what it is.
Yeah. Let's talk about that because it's huge, right? I mean, the divorce rate, like it's more than 50%. Me personally, you know, I was married for 10 years and unfortunately it didn't work. Both of us full-time pastors, you know, at the time. And so there's something about marriage that has to be there, has to be present. I think both in both the preparation of it, you know, which you guys are very strong as part of, and in the execution of it, you know, but something is missing. It seems like in our society, you know, and I know we have people watching from different countries around the world. So I'm talking about the United States, but I imagine it's probably similar in other places too. The whole idea of marriage has changed. Like our marriages used to be the foundation of our communities. They were the bedrock, right? It was the family, the home where children got their consciousness and husbands and wives got their confidence. They got their understanding of who they were. And that's changed. People don't seem to look at marriage the way they used to. It doesn't seem valued. People just live together. And now I even know couples that don't even live together. They're like, you know, I know a couple that's married that lives in different states and they're okay with that. And so how do you, but you guys, obviously you've committed your lives to this. You still believe in the value of marriage. You still believe that there's something about marriage that our community needs. And so, you know, what has to change in order for these numbers to be reversed, you know, in terms of the amount of divorce, but more than that, in terms of the way people see marriage to change? Because if people don't feel like there's value in marriage, they're going to always go into it half-heartedly. They're not going to give it their all. So I don't know the answers, but I'm hoping maybe you guys do.
I think I have. I think that churches are a cornerstone as well, and I think that the church's outreach to families, I think that will help with the change, because I have to say it's a background that I came from. It's a background from where my wife came from. I mean, we have different stories when it comes to that, but you know, I have a tendency to think that the values that I carry for my family, for my wife, that it comes from a Christian foundation. Yeah. And I really think that, you know, church is the first institution that, you know, God put in place. That's why, you know, it's always looked at, and it's always looked at, you know, with a microscope, because people are curious about it. People do want to know more about marriages. But coming back to the church piece, I really think that the church's outreach and its influence should be great in the community, because churches breed, you know, Christian singles. It brings godly singles, godly marriages, and I think when you see that, you see better things happening in the workplace. I mean, because that person beside you is the boss, is the single, is the, you know, is the neighbor, you know, and in that you see stronger couples, you see stronger relationships, just out abroad.
Yeah.
The other solution I would say is that mentorship as well, you know, and so like, as Clark was saying, like the church, if we stay in our bubble, right, and we're like, oh, we only have Christian friends and we all have, right, if we stay in our bubble, then we're not able, you know, God calls us to outreach, right? So we're not able to pull people in. So that sense of community has to be there. Not so much that we're converting everyone and all that stuff, but the fact is we're just sitting as examples. We're just sitting as, hey, let's do life together and let's help each other through this, right? Because even in our own neighborhood, we look at the different marriages around our neighborhood. First of all, almost all of our 4 neighbors are all married.
Wow.
And right across the street, there are 93 and 92. They've been married longer than we've been alive.
Wow.
And so when we look at it, right, and so here we are, we exchange cucumbers and tomatoes and, you know, we
Real
take
community.
Yes, right. That's how you do life, right? And if the church could see that as an extension, it's not just on Sundays or Wednesdays or Thursdays or whatever, right? That it is every day. It's living your life out loud. It's allowing people in your front yard, your front porch, your living room, and etc. It's barbecuing and sharing ribs and hamburgers across the fence. It's noticing, you know, Clark has had really powerful conversations mowing the lawn with other men, like mowing the lawn, and then the neighbors like having trouble with his marriage, and they just mow together and talking about marriage, right? That you living your life out loud. That is one. And then that mentorship. Clark and I are really big in making sure we have couples that we reach up to that have grown children, have been married for years, and that couples that we're pouring into so that our marriage stays healthy, right? Because if you're always being poured into, then you become stagnant. You got more information than you can give. Pouring out, then you get empty, and then you become stagnant again. It's that kind of balance. Yeah. We really work towards.
I love that input output. You got to constantly make sure that your life, right? Like living water is moving water. It's got something pouring into it, and it's also pouring out into something. So I love what you said too about like living out loud, because like that's what Wisdom Sparks is all about. It's in terms of what you're saying, the church having outreach. It's about getting outside of the 4 walls so that we can, by through our whole lives, not just on Sunday, but 7 days a week, be transformative, right? Be a part of that living flow of love and community to the people around us. But we talk about the church, and we mentioned how the idea of marriage has changed over these years. I'm going to throw a curveball. I think the idea of church has changed, right? Like a lot of people don't feel like church is a safe space, unfortunately. Especially when it comes to marriage and when it comes to trying to live up to what people believe the ideals of the traditional church, or I won't say traditional, but the historic, because I don't like to draw these boundaries. So talk about that a little bit. Like, how do we, as people of faith, right? The church, we know, is the people. It's not just the building, but there's a structure. There are layers that have been put on top of that, right, within the institution that have not always been friendly to marriages in terms of the messages that are communicated. And so how do you go about that, living that balance, right? Being inspired by your faith, because I know that you are, and what you know that God has intended for marriage. And at the same time, being approachable enough, like you guys both are, to people who they didn't grow up in the church. They don't know all of that. So how do you bridge that for them?
You want to take
that? Sorry, I know it's not easy.
Well, no, it's not. And, you know, I think it has to do with one's focus, and you have to be the change that you want to see in people. And so it's So the thing is, it's like when you're living it out, and you're not, because this is kind of difficult, because I don't want to step on many people's toes, but I really think that lots of times people are so focused on people their actions that you know, some people are really judgmental when they see the bishop fail or the deacon fail, and what they don't realize that they're human too, and you know they also fall under God's grace as well. And honestly, lots of times, you know, people are they are very judgmental, and you know they give out a lot of this negativity. But at the same time, it's like it's still the responsibility of us to love everyone, you know, and to show them like, hey, that, you know, whatever happened with them happened with them. You know, you still have your own personal relationship with God, just like we do. And so it's like the only way to, or one of the only ways to get people not to focus so much on people is to say, okay, they did fail, but you know, you have to help teach them as well. You teach them through scriptures. But I think the best teacher is what we say to kids is caught not taught. You know, it's like, you know, it's like that happened with them, but you know, we don't physically say, well, watch us, but you know,
they are anyway.
They are. And so it's like we have to be careful, but it's also about vulnerability and showing people that, hey, you know what, this is our lives. You can look at our lives. You can see what we're doing, you know, and you know, and then hopefully that helps bring them to the fold, that we're loving them, that we're inviting them in to say, hey, come sit down with us, and you know, things will happen. You know, things will happen. We will make mistakes, and that's the whole thing about mentorship too, is showing people that, hey, we made mistakes. Yeah, we've done things wrong, but we've gotten help. You know, so it's definitely about being the change that you want to see with people.
I love that. And the vulnerability, like you said, you know, the more people in the church are vulnerable and showing people outside of the church that we are human, right? We are not a bunch of Jesuses walking around, perfect people, but we are human. I love that.
But I think also giving each other that kind of permission and that space to fumble and fail. I think we, in historical, you know, you had to look a certain way and be a certain way to be a Christian, right? And so if we could give permission for someone to walk in jeans and a t-shirt and a cap, and next to them have someone in a full suit with a big hat and and we could give permission for that diversity, then we give permission for God to work in each person's life in that equal diversity, you know. But when we box in who God is in the church, then we box in what the Holy Spirit can actually do.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
And look, we've been to churches where we've been judged and we've been burned and we've been traumatized, and we had a season of healing individually and as a couple. So we get it. Like we get walking into church and feeling like, oh, we don't no longer belong here. Understand serving years and years and years in a church only to feel abandoned or betrayed, right? So we understand personally that spiritual trauma. And that space of healing is important, but I also think this permission to be you is equally important.
Yeah. So I love that. And you talked about diversity. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, Black and brown men, Clark. I mean, you know, unfortunately, we know the deal, you know, and a lot of people, Facebook, social media is something else. You know, social media can be used for so many good things, but sometimes it's used for so many bad things. There's so many memes that go around. And honestly, you know, a lot of times Black and brown men get negatively stereotyped. They're seen as like unfaithful or unavailable or absent when it comes to marriage. And we know some of that is due to the historical trauma of slavery and the impact that has had on Black and brown families. But talk a little bit about the role that you play? Because I can imagine that might have an extra burden, be an extra burden for Black and brown men to prove people wrong. Like when they enter into marriage, this sort of, chip that you have, like, it's like everybody's waiting for you to mess up so they can say, told you.
Yeah.
So what is that like? Like, how do you do that? And then say something about how we can change the narrative, because I do think the narrative needs to be changed.
I take a deep breath because unfortunately I've been fighting that even before my marriage and before I was a Christian. And like this started, and I had to say I had to give a lot of credit to my mom, because my mom, she at an early age she taught me about the stereotypes that I will have as a Black man, and how I would have to fight like three, four times as hard to, just to get, to a normal space. And so carrying that burden, I've always carried that. And so I've always had to, stand upright, walk a different way, even how I talk. I used to get teased when I was younger about, oh, you don't talk Black,
Right.
Black enough. Even the way you walk, you don't walk Black, or
Right.
and stuff like that. And so unfortunately, that's something that I've always had to battle. But I think just again with what my mom was saying to me, I always had my head up, always, felt confident in who I was and what have you. And the thing is, it's like, again, just speaking about example, it's like everyone's watching. And just as you said, people are waiting for you to step out of line. I've walked down the street in which, I'm in Georgetown and I'm walking and a woman clutches her purse and turns.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, in my head, I'm like, wow. But, I'm going to give you a straight face. I'm just going to walk right by you. And so, I've had to deal with, with stereotypical things like that. But I have to keep my composure. I have to keep, those thoughts in line and keep it trained and keep it real and walk ahead. So yeah, that's with that.
Yeah. Myra, I want to ask you, like, what, because I know you guys counsel couples together and individuals. You also spend a lot of time talking to women, single women who want to be married. And also I can imagine both of you're talking a lot to husbands and you're talking to wives. What role do you think women can play, especially Black and brown women, in helping support Black and brown men in carrying that burden, or in helping them understand that that's not a burden they were ever meant to carry? Like, what role can we play?
You know what, Sean, as my husband was speaking right now, I got a lump in my throat. Just thinking of him walking through life, dealing with things that are abnormal. Like we need to understand that has to be a shocker to everyone. We've seen so much hurt in the Black and brown community that we're almost numb to it. And we don't pause long enough to say, that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like it becomes the norm for Black and brown men that a woman can clutch her purse when she sees my husband, who you should be clutching your purse for me, not for him when it comes to personality, right? Like he is just such a gentleman, so calm, so patient, so intuitive. And I'm just the opposite, right? I am not gentle and still working on it, right, honey? I'm not gentle. I speak my mind. I speak before I think. I am not filtering anything out. And so, it just hurts my heart. And I think as women, we need to feel that pain and understand that this is the plight that our Black and brown men are carrying, whether they're carrying it graciously like my husband, or whether they're being crushed by it.
Yeah. Wow.
have to, when you feel that pain, it's like a mother and her child. When you know your child is struggling, you know, you are one of the biggest supporters of autism, right? ASD, because
Mhm.
you have it in your house, your son
Yeah.
is grappling with it, and you realized that that is the burden that was not for him.
Yeah.
It wasn't for him, but he still has it on him. So you've decided to be the voice for him. And like, as women, when we hear our husbands who say, like, I can't get in an elevator without women moving to the side, or I walk by and someone is reassuring that their car is locked, right? When you
Yeah.
one, realize that that is the burden that he has, and you need to make sure that one, you are advocating for him, and
Mhm.
two, that his home, that he is truly the master of his home, that it is truly his safe haven, that he could breathe, and that he is not receiving that same kind of behavior and
Wow.
same kind of burden that he receives outside the home that he
Wow.
doesn't receive in.
Yeah, that's powerful, because if he comes home and as a wife or as children, we're teaching our children that they can't trust daddy, or we're always looking and suspicious of what's daddy doing. I can just imagine that trauma, that just no safe space, right? And
Or the nagging, right? Coming home.
yeah, yeah,
Right, like, I
yeah.
just came home from the world that beat me down, and I'm coming into a woman who's beating me down.
Yeah, over and over again, based on what the world has told her about me.
Mm.
It's so much. And I think about all of these things. And you talked about the pandemic earlier. We know through the pandemic the impact of mental health and the importance of mental health for everyone, but also how just under-resourced the Black and Brown community is when it comes to mental health supports, right? May is Mental Health Awareness Month. For those of you watching, make sure that you learn more about mental health, and make sure you become vulnerable and talk to each other about how important it is to get that mental health. But what I want to talk about is how it's like these things are compounding, right? We have all of these different burdens, racism, and these constant microaggressions that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Then we have people who are married, who are together as husband and wife, whether they're Black, brown, white, whatever, living under the burden of just people having a skewed view of marriage in general. You sort of feel like the whole community or the world is waiting for your marriage to fail. Like, are you going to be the one out of two couples that end in divorce? And all of these things have an impact on our mental health, on our ability to be able to function as people and as individuals and as a couple. One of the things I always say is that underneath the structures of a church are just individual people. And the same thing is true for marriage. A marriage is two people that have agreed to walk side by side and interact in that. So when we think about all of these stressors on our mental health, plus the fact that many Black and Brown communities are under resources, I can imagine that has an impact on marriage. So can you say a little bit about that? Like, how have you seen sort of that compounding of additional burdens to carry but less resources to access, having an impact on marriages in the Black and Brown communities? And then what do we do to increase equity?
Girl, how much time do you have?
Oh,
Like, this is
I
my
know.
stage right here. This is where I'm so passionate about it. But we understand now in the world of mental health how we call it intergenerational trauma.
Mm,
We understand that the things that happen to our grandmothers and our great grandmothers and grandfathers, we're holding on to it in our DNA.
wow.
What, right? So I remember a conversation that this white person was having with a Black person, and they were attempting to have real conversation. And one of the questions that the white woman had was, why are so many Black people angry? Like just
Wow.
walk around angry. And I go back to your DNA, right? If you've been raped and pulled away from your family and abused and beaten, and you saw your people being killed in front of you, I don't know, would you be a little pissed off?
Yeah.
I
Wow.
don't know, right? And so we have we have that DNA. We have, now everyone is awakened, right? So everyone suddenly is awakened. Whereas my husband said he's been dealing with these microaggressions all of his life.
Yeah. From day one.
Right. Like it didn't happen in 2020 for us, right? It happened, at Macy's when you get old, or, it happened, in California when you going on for a tour, right? These are the things that keep happening all of our lives. But now that we have the world that's now awakened and everyone wants to learn, I think that it is important that we understand that all the history that has the compound trauma that has what we called in our world of psychology complex trauma, where you're not just dealing with one thing, you're dealing with many layers of one thing. And the solution, girl, I don't know, right? I do know the wonderful thing about our brain is that it is able to adjust and move and change. And now we're learning that there are actual specific things that we can do in therapy to help our mind truly kind of readjust the narrative that we're hearing. And so we can move forward and be more aggressive. But the other piece of that is getting in community of people where create that space for you, that you can be yourself, that you could be real, that you could speak it out. Because I know that we have been a community that's been quiet. Similar to what I've said earlier, we've almost become numb. Oh, another shooting.
Yeah.
Another death. Oh, another boy.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the way they do things, right? We've become numb, but we need a space that we can say, no.
Yeah. It's
That's
not
going to continue to happen under my watch. And when we create that space, because we're powerful in numbers, then we could move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I just want to say thank you. As I shared, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I know you, Mayra, you are also a clinical therapist working with both children and adults who are wrestling with anxiety and depression. So I can imagine in this time, it's difficult for providers. And I know you as well, Clark, you're working with children with special needs. So thank you for that. I have a special place in my heart with my son having autism. I'm grateful for people like both of you who you have your lives, your professions and your degrees and your training, and you're surrendering all of that. Like, this is what I live and breathe, and this is what I dream about, that people of faith will use the totality of their lives, their every day, to manifest. I say they're manifesting the transformation that God is doing in them. And in the process of it, they're transforming the world around them. So you guys you're making a difference in your individual lives, but together as a couple, you have decided that you're going to be living examples. And that takes a lot. It's like you have committed to be on display and to use your life to be able to rebuild marriages, rebuild communities, rebuild individuals who, as you said, Mayra, are trying to find a path forward despite the darkness, despite the situations, despite the problems that seem to grow daily. You're doing it. And so I'm grateful. I know that your faith inspires you. I know that both of you are praying people, that you're praying together with your children. I've seen some of your posts. I know that family time is important for you, your two children, and I don't want to forget the dog, right? You guys have a beautiful. So thank you for that. As we wrap up, I'll just say that's what Wisdom Sparks is all about. We do these weekly live streams because we believe that when people of faith connect with each other, that something sparks inside of them, an idea or inspiration. So before we close, are there any last words you want to share with people who are watching that just might inspire them, if they're a married couple, to use their marriage as an example, or if it's a church leader to build a ministry around marriages for them, and even for mental health? And then also tell us how we can get in touch with you guys going forward, because I know that you have some exciting things going on.
Well, I think for us, I think a few things. One is that when you're looking at marriage, making sure that you're implementing mentorship. Don't be afraid to share your life and pull somebody in while you're doing laundry, while you're changing diapers. You know, whatever that life stage you're in, don't be afraid to pull people into that life.
Yeah, awesome.
She kind of took mine. I was gonna say, yeah, don't be afraid to get help. I think that there's a pride in the Black community that they don't reach out for help. You know, because I know when I was growing up, you know, my wife's whole field was just frowned upon. Like, oh, I don't need help. I don't need to see no therapist. I can handle this myself. And that's definitely not a good place to be, because you end up isolating yourself away from the people that can help you. So don't be afraid to get help, to seek help.
Yeah. I see one of our viewers here, September Summers, says, congratulations to a wonderful couple who teach the balance of biblical foundation along with practical living. May God continue to enlarge your ministry. Oh. Yes, I agree. And I think those are perfect words to close out on. So thank you to everyone who joined us today on Facebook and on YouTube. This has been Wisdom Sparks, a program of 316 DC, and we hope you will join us again next week, next Thursday, 12 o'clock, same time, same place. Blessings.